Brazil's far-right President Jair Bolsonaro has signed another decree loosening gun laws. The measure opens Brazil to guns and ammunition made outside of the country. It also raises a limit on ammunition. Gun owners will be able to purchase up to 5,000 cartridges per year for normal guns, while restricted arms are limited to 1,000 a year. Bolsonaro already signed the decree in January to make it easier to own a gun. He says the new measure will take effect in 30 days. Thousands of people from the Brazilian homeless workers movement have protested against the country's housing crisis in Sao Paulo. The coordinator of the movement, Guillermo Boulos, says there will be an explosion of occupations as unemployment rises, salaries drop, and the government does not provide any alternatives. Our correspondent Ignacio Lemus gives us more details.
Thousands of homeless workers have demonstrated in the city center of Sao Paulo to protest against the government of Jair Bolsonaro, which stopped social programs focused on housing, such as the program My House, My Life. The goal of that program was to give 3 million of houses to Brazilian citizens. After Dilma Rousseff's impeachment, a part of the program for low-income people was stopped. On Monday, students also took to the streets to protest against government cuts to public education, including kindergarten and university studies. Social movements and labor unions are planning a general strike on June 15th to protest against the Bolsonaro government's neoliberal policies.
We thank Nacho for that report. The Bolivian government has begun giving free housing to families who were victims of a landslide that destroyed more than 68 houses in the capital, La Paz. We have more details in this report.
The first 14 families out of 68 who were victims of a landslide last week have received an apartment built by the government as part of a national social housing program.
I'm very surprised because when I saw the department, it was very similar to what I had. I'm grateful for this.
We didn't think they would find a solution so soon. We are happy because we now have a place to stay. Now we can start over.
The landslide affected several houses of 2 central neighborhoods in the city of La Paz. The victims did not manage to recover their belongings and must now start from scratch.
I am very happy and calm because my children will have a place to sleep quietly. We don't need to be on alert anymore. Even though what happened to us is very difficult to overcome, we lost everything in the blink of an eye.
The affected people received help and solidarity immediately. The tragedy came as the government was already building social housing.
It is very likely that this housing operation will last for a few days, maybe several weeks, because we are working to classify owners who lost their houses and people who were renting houses.
The first 14 families received apartments of around 80 square meters, 2 bathrooms, 3 bedrooms, and a living room in a residential building that the government built in an area in the south, 25 minutes from the city center.
This tragedy took place on Tuesday. Families were left without their homes. A lifelong effort was gone. It is very serious. Some were owners of the houses, and others rented them. But all the effort and family wealth were gone within minutes.
The landslide on Tuesday, April 30th, destroyed 68 houses. Another 20 residences must be razed near the traditional neighborhood of Sapocachi. Authorities continue to look for 4 people who were reported missing.
U.S. Border Patrol officials in Arizona say they arrested 700 migrants on Monday. Authorities based in the city of Yuma say that brings the total number of migrants arrested to 1,500 over the last 3 days. However, the capacity of the detention center is only for about 400 people. And it appears from the video the Border Patrol posted on Twitter that many of those taken into custody were children. Supporters of Venezuela's right-wing opposition are preventing the delivery of basic goods into the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. Members of the Embassy Protection Collective are currently inside the building at the invitation of the legitimate government of Venezuela. Today is day 29 of the live-in. However, right-wing mobs gathered outside have been threatening them as well as journalists covering events. The U.S. police have turned a blind eye to the right-wing violence and have helped prevent the delivery of food.
We'll let the food go in at least.
The fire department paid a visit to the building in what activists say is a move which seeks to find a pretext to carry out an invasion into the diplomatic office. Our correspondent, Alina Duarte, spoke with Brian Becker, the director of Answer Coalition, one of the main groups participating in the Embassy Protection Collective.
I'm standing here outside the Embassy of Venezuela here in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. Of course, the Embassy Protection Collective still inside, holding the fort, having high spirits, high morale. This morning, the fire department came in to inspect the building, and we believe that the government, being unable to legally evict the people inside, is seeking to find a pretext, something called an administrative raid, that could be announced either by the fire department or by a public health department, whereby they stipulate that there's a health issue or a safety issue or a public safety issue regarding the events here. There's been some talk from the fire department that they need to prevent the alteration of public safety or public space here. But I have to point out that the only people who have created a problem on the outside are the people who are the supporters of Juan Guaido. They are the ones who are making huge amount of noise and attacking people with the support, the connivance, the complicity of the U.S. Secret Service, which is standing by and letting them do it. Moreover, the Vienna Convention makes it illegal. Hear this, fire department, hear this, city officials. The Vienna Convention makes this building inviolable, which means that they cannot use an administrative raid, either the fire department or health services, as a pretext to carry out some sort of invasion or intrusion into this diplomatic compound. That too would be illegal.
Over the weekend, 3 social leaders were attacked in the Colombian department of Cauca. Critics of the government say President Iván Duque hasn't addressed this issue that has claimed the lives of more than 600 social leaders so far.
Social leaders shared their experiences in Bogota's book fair, especially the threats they face from various armed groups. The European Union's ambassador also took part in the event and described the situation as a social genocide.
We firmly reject these attacks and threats against social leaders, leaders who defend human rights and are building a democracy in this country.
This comes as 3 social leaders suffered an attack in the southern department of Cauca, including known leader Francia Marquez. According to human rights defenders, attacks have been intensifying over the last 2 months.
After the national social minga came to an end, we knew the government and other institutions stigmatized us. As a result, we have already received 12 threats from various paramilitary and other armed groups. We were expecting new attacks.
People living in Colombia's most remote territories say they are facing illegal and legal armed groups, but also groups known as guarimbas, which are financed by right-wing politicians.
We know informants of paramilitary groups, informants of guerrillas, and now we know about informants who represent armed groups founded in Venezuela. They fight against what they call a dictatorship, but after they cross the border, they take away our territories and kick us out. They hold trainings and meetings here.
And while facing increasing threats, social leaders and human rights defenders continue demanding that the government of President Iván Duque guarantees their protection, putting an end to the killings of social leaders throughout the country.
With hours to go before polls officially open in South Africa, thousands of citizens have already cast their ballots through special votes. This allows voters who cannot vote on election day to do it before. Those allowed to cast special votes include the disabled, pregnant women, and those with health issues. Almost 800,000 voters were granted permission to cast their ballots before the official polls on Wednesday. Now let's take a closer look at the three candidates who have been leading the polls. Cyril Ramaphosa of the African National Congress was a key trade union leader during apartheid and the protege of Nelson Mandela, who led talks to end white minority rule and helped write the new constitution. After a career in business in 2014, he returned to politics to become Jacob Zuma's vice president, and he took over as president of South Africa in 2018. Ramaphosa has promised to create 275,000 jobs each year, to curb unemployment, and to accelerate land reform. Mose Maimane is a leader of the Democratic Alliance. He joined the party in 2009 and was fast-tracked through its ranks to take control in 2015. Before getting into politics, Maimane ran his own management consultancy and lectured at a business school. His main challenge has been to convince many black middle-class voters that the DA is not still a white party. Maimane says he aims to build one South Africa and eliminate corruption. And the 38-year-old Julius Malema is a former ANC youth leader who launched the Economic Freedom Fighters, or EFF, party in 2013. He was kicked out of the ruling party after coming into conflict with the leadership and has thrived as a rebel. Malema is known as the voice of the young and unemployed. He demands the seizure of land from whites without compensation. He is a strong advocate for nationalization of the mines and banks. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Many citizens visited Eva Perón's grave in the Argentinian capital to mark the centenary of her birth. In the La Recoleta Cemetery in Buenos Aires, people took turns to pay tribute at the grave of the famous former First Lady and political and social leader. Known as Evita, the Argentinian icon was born on May 7, 1919. Serving first as president of the female Peronist Party, Eva left a mark in the fight for women participation in politics and the working class. The government in Chile is presenting a labor reform plan despite its rejection by workers and unions. We have more in this report.
Images like this have become normal. The Labor Secretariat left its workers without a transportation bonus that helped them breastfeed their children.
This measure only benefits the businessmen.
4 out of every 10 women in Chile are currently out of work for personal reasons, among them maternity. But the government is not offering any solution to this, rather leaving them to work at home, as proposed in the labor reform.
Today we're going to present a new legal project that will address labor, family, and inclusion as part of the agenda to modernize labor. With this, we want to improve the quality of life for our people by creating better working conditions for Chileans and giving them greater freedom to manage their working day.
The government is proposing the same amount of hours of work per day, with the same salaries, but condense all of this in a 4-day work week, and then have 3 days off.
We're seeing that one of the biggest consequences of this reform could be exploitation. Workers will have to use their days off to work on other things, as this bill doesn't address the key issues that workers have, among them the low incomes.
6 out of every 10 people are working full-time, but don't have an income to support their families.
60% of workers, especially women, have been diagnosed with a mental illness as a consequence of their work environment. This legal bill could worsen the situation. These reforms are once again putting more pressure on the shoulders of workers.
The promise made by President Sebastián Piñera during his campaign to increase vacation days would also only be possible if workers work extra hours. The reform has not been presented to workers' unions. Now, the parliament has to debate the bill.
CARICOM's chairman has told the International Contact Group on Venezuela that the time to put the people of Venezuela first is now. CARICOM's chairman, Dr. Timothy Harris, was addressing a meeting with the group in Costa Rica. Dr. Harris stressed that the people of Venezuela must determine their own future, and he reiterated the Caribbean community's keen interest in bringing a peaceful resolution to the situation in Venezuela without foreign and military intervention. Dr. Harris, who is also the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, led a CARICOM delegation to Costa Rica. A plane which departed from Jamaica had to make an emergency landing at Miami International Airport, reportedly due to hydraulic problems. One tire blew out when the American Airlines 737 aircraft landed. American Airlines officials say hydrologic fluid had leaked onto the runway. The plane has since been towed. It was believed to have left Jamaica with a bad tire. No one was injured.
And we'll get away from the cages as soon as we can.
In Trinidad and Tobago, a politician accused of corruption, Gerald Ramdeen, has resigned as an opposition senator. Ramdeen tendered his resignation prior to his appearance in court on Monday. Ramdeen and the former Attorney General Anand Ramlogan were charged with corruption-related offenses.
But, I've always taken a particular kind of approach when I was in government and outside. I continued to take that approach, and it was clear your name and come back. This is what I'd said to former ministers, so this is not unusual.
Dominica is continuing its quest to become the world's first fully climate resilient nation. The Caribbean nation suffered catastrophic damage from Hurricane Maria in 2017 and Tropical Storm Erika in 2015 as well as other storms. In 2017, the government established the Climate Resilient Execution Agency, a task force designed to hurricane-proof the island. Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit says the next step is a paradigm shift in education.
One of the things that we have to look at, not only in Dominica, but is a matter that I keep raising throughout the Caribbean, is that there appears to be somewhat of a mismatch between what students go out to university to study and what the Caribbean needs. And what you find in many instances is that there is a saturation in some areas of studies, and there's a huge deficiency in many other areas that are critical to the economy of our countries.
Caribbean countries are being warned to conserve water as the drought situation in the region worsens. The Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology has urged that people closely monitor water resources and try to conserve as much as possible, at least until June or July. They also warned that a short-term drought can impact agriculture as well as the flow of small rivers and streams in most Caribbean countries. Namibia's president has declared a state of emergency to tackle the effects of a drought. Hage Geingob says he has mobilized all government departments to protect Namibians and their livestock. Geingob says the rain pattern has not been favorable in the country, causing a natural disaster that will affect many people. A Zimbabwean pressure group has camped for more than a month at the new U.S. Embassy in Harare, demanding the country lift sanctions unconditionally. The Broad Alliance Against Sanctions, which started early April, vowed to continue camping at the embassy until the blockade is lifted. The group started as a small gathering of 7 people, but has since grown to hundreds. However, the U.S. Embassy maintains the sanctions placed during the leadership of the former president, Robert Mugabe.
We as Broad Alliance Against Sanctions were carrying out a video at the American Embassy to show our detest against the sanctions that were imposed on Zimbabwe 18 years ago. In the past, we have realized that people were making petitions, people were doing marches to show their detest against the sanctions, but the Americans have not been moved. So we decided that maybe if we go and stay at their doorstep, we sleep there, we eat there, we do everything there, maybe they will be moved, maybe they will realize that our generation, our ordinary citizens are suffering from the so-called targeted sanctions.
A number of soldiers remain stationed outside the house of Benin's former president, Thomas Boniyayi, days after demonstrators gathered in protest. Their anger was sparked by the exclusion of all opposition parties from parliamentary elections on April 28th. The protesters alleged that internet access was also restricted on the day of the polls. A government warplane has been shot down and its pilot captured in Tripoli by forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar. The jet was shot down in Al-Hira, about 10 kilometers from Garyan, south of Tripoli. The Government of National Accord pilot who survived the attack was captured and is being held by Haftar's forces. The pilot is alleged to be of Portuguese nationality. There hasn't been any immediate comments from Libyan officials about the incident.
From where?
Portugal. Sudanese and Libyan families who fled fighting have sought refuge at a school in Tripoli as fighting continues around the capital. The public, Scout and Girl Guide movement, who are giving assistance to those affected at the school, said they have been taking care of more than 2,000 families since the beginning of the crisis until now. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The U.S. state of Georgia has introduced a ban on abortion after 6 weeks. State leaders applauded as the Republican Governor Brian Kemp signed the so-called Life Act. The law makes abortion illegal once a doctor can detect a heartbeat from the fetus. It is among the most restrictive abortion legislation in the U.S. It comes as conservatives around the country seek to persuade the Supreme Court to re-examine the issue. People in Georgia are protesting against the law outside the state capitol. Women organizations criticize the measure for restricting their rights.
We have a governor that is committed to limiting access and pushing access out of reach for those of us who need it the most. Kemp has sent a clear message about whose lives are important and whose lives aren't important. And I must say, as a black woman living here in the state of Georgia, it doesn't feel like he thinks that my life is important.
It is a forced pregnancy bill. This is a forced restriction of health care bill. This is not just about abortion. This is restricting access to health care services, specifically for marginalized communities, specifically for black people, specifically for queer people, specifically for trans people and non-binary people here in Georgia.
The United Kingdom will take part in European Parliament elections on May 23rd because there is not enough time to get a Brexit deal ratified by the British Parliament before then.
We very much hoped that we'd be able to get our exit sorted, have the treaty withdrawal concluded so that those elections did not have to take place. But legally, they do have to take place unless our withdrawal has been given legal effect. So those will now go ahead, but we will be redoubling our efforts and talks with MPs of all parties to try to make sure that the delay after that is as short as possible.
In Chile, artists have transformed streets in the city of Valparaiso into an open-air gallery. Colorful murals and graffiti cover the walls and floors of the western Chilean port city. It's estimated that more than 300 street artists painted portions of the walls in the last 5 years. What at first was seen as vandalism is now a very popular touristic destination. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.